The clock on the bedside table blazed 3 a.m. Not a tick, not a creak, but the sharp, unfamiliar scent of crushed velvet. A perfume I'd never bought her, and certainly never smelled in our sterile, functional bedroom. That's what pulled me from my half-sleep. I was in bed, rigid, every muscle tense, a spectator in the slow, agonizing death of my marriage. A shadow fell over me, then a lean-in, a perfunctory, almost clinical attempt at a goodnight kiss. I didn't flinch, didn't breathe. The weight of 10 years of loyal commitment versus the crushing reality of that perfume hung in the air. I just spoke the word, low and cold, that shattered our decade-long facade. Him. Was he worth the price of this? That single syllable detonated. She recoiled as if struck. The chaos began immediately. Furious denial, crocodile tears, and a terrifying, cold fury that suggested I was the one invading her privacy. "It was just a business dinner," she spat, but her voice was laced with a tremor that betrayed her professional mask. I watched the performance, detached, remembering the brutal truth of the last 2 years. I had moved to her country, sacrificed my successful, well-paying career only to crash and burn, struggling for years to re-establish myself. The pressure to match her financial standing, Dr. Evelyn Thorne, the specialized physician with skyscraper dreams, had driven me to a soul-rotting timeshare job and a full mental breakdown. She offered no emotional support, only contempt. That night, she wasn't seeking dinner. She was auditioning for Alexander Sterling, her obscenely wealthy, married boss, a known viper with a history of collecting broken promises and discarded wives. The entire scene was a grotesque tableau of ambition over affection. Then, in the middle of her practiced denial, the slip, "He didn't even notice me," she sobbed. A 4-word confession. It wasn't about a casual dinner. It was a failed tryout. She dressed in that expensive gown, worn her best diamonds, and, as I discovered the next morning, that shimmering black Victoria's Secret lingerie, a brand she hadn't touched since our honeymoon. All for a conquest that rejected her. She insisted she was late because she lost track of time. A ludicrous claim from a woman whose life ran on a physician's rigid schedule. As I stood by the washer, the scent of the perfume still clinging to the lace, I felt a chilling intuition. This wasn't just about my marriage. It was about money. She was looking for an escape hatch from me and into Sterling's limitless wealth. The air was thick with her lies, a toxic smog I'd been breathing for years. Just as I crumpled the lace, a tiny, folded piece of paper fluttered out of the gown's lining. A receipt. A cash purchase from a dilapidated electronics store across the city, dated 2 days prior. A burner phone. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake. It was a premeditated act. The hunt for the truth was now armed with a first, fragile clue. The price of her ambition was about to be paid in full. For a desperate month, I clung to her flimsy apology, that brief, contrite moment of false remorse. I was an emotional addict, willing to swallow any lie if it meant saving the idea of our marriage. But Evelyn couldn't maintain the performance. A month later, the cold reversal was complete. You imagine the entire thing. You're unbalanced from your timeshare stress. That night was an innocent dinner. It was textbook gaslighting, a chilling, calculated attempt to rewrite history and declare me the unstable villain. This second betrayal, the audacious attempt to steal my sanity, was far worse than her initial infidelity. My world was already collapsing into the chaos of an inevitable divorce. I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of her manufactured reality, frantically searching for an island of solid proof. Then, the cosmic irony struck with the force of a wrecking ball. 2 weeks after the dinner, a massive, unexpected inheritance, a dizzying sum of millions, slammed into my bank account. It was a golden life raft, a chance to finally resume the successful, well-paying career path I'd sacrificed. But I was too blinded by pain to see it clearly. Foolishly, I saw it only as a tool to buy her loyalty, a chance to finally meet her insatiable financial appetite. I poured the money and the next 2 years into our crumbling marriage, purchasing expensive European vacations, buying her the lavish apartment she craved, hoping to paper over the cracks with pure gold. I wasted the equivalent of 3 lifetimes of wealth trying to purchase a single moment of her genuine love. It was an epic, Agonizing failure. The money didn't fix the marriage. It just amplified her coldness, turning her into a distant, entitled queen, and my money into her new target. In hindsight, I see the truth. That inheritance was a bomb, and her denial was a calculated move to secure a larger, predatory share of the coming divorce settlement. She was rewriting the history of our failure to steal my millions. The wound of her betrayal festered, and I knew I needed more than mere intuition. I needed unbreakable proof. The burner phone receipt was the thread, but I needed the tapestry. My search led me to her rarely touched office desk, a shrine to her professional detachment. Hidden beneath a pile of obscure medical journals, I found it, a worn, leather-bound notebook. It wasn't a diary, but a deceptively titled patient log. My hands trembled as I opened it. The meticulous entries, written in her sharp, physician script, were not about medical ailments, but about risk assessment, leveraging assets, and securing the future. She had been plotting her escape for months, viewing our marriage as a stepping stone and my breakdown as an inconvenience to be managed. The entries confirmed her escalating pursuit of Alexander Sterling, revealing their relationship was not a one-off attempt but a long-term investment. The first page held the key, a chilling, handwritten entry, dated the day after the failed anniversary dinner, meticulously disguised as a medical follow-up. Yes, first follow-up. Project is moving forward. New collateral secured. The language was purely financial, and the word collateral screamed one thing: my inheritance. She had moved beyond merely trying to cheat. She was actively using our marital assets, or the prospect of them, to fund a secret life. This log was the roadmap to her destruction, and it was written in her own calculating hand. The patient log became my Bible, my obsession. I spent a week dissecting every entry, every cryptic abbreviation, neglecting sleep and food. It detailed her growing panic over a crippling, undisclosed financial catastrophe looming over her clinic. A huge IRS audit or possibly malpractice lawsuits she was hiding. To save her reputation and her business, she had entered into a devastating, Faustian pact with Sterling. He wasn't just her lover, he was her predatory investor. The log explicitly stated she had taken a massive, high-interest loan from him, secured by an irrevocable digital deed related to her medical practice. But the real collateral, the ultimate leverage Sterling held over the ambitious Dr. Thorne, was the proof of her physical affair, explicit digital evidence that would destroy both her professional license and her claim to my inheritance. This damning evidence, the unedited, unretouched truth of her betrayal, was not in her personal computer. It was hidden inside her clinic's highly secured, state-of-the-art server network. In a private partition, she cleverly named the Digital Safety Deposit Box. The log even detailed the secret access file's name, written in a cold cipher only I, the grieving husband, could crack. Project Phoenix. If I could retrieve Project Phoenix, I would not only expose her adultery, annihilating her divorce claim, and protecting the vast majority of my inheritance, but I would also destroy Sterling's career and financially ruin Evelyn. She couldn't gaslight a federal judge holding a hard drive of undeniable evidence. This was the ultimate trump card. The urgency was paralyzing. Her lawyers, smelling the millions of my inheritance, were already filing a malicious motion to declare me mentally incompetent, leveraging my recent breakdown and the timeshare debacle. If they succeeded, a court-appointed administrator, likely her choice, would gain temporary control of my finances, crippling my defense and allowing her to seize the money. I had only 72 hours to infiltrate her clinic's fortress, bypass military-grade security, and retrieve the file before I was legally neutered. My impossible task was stark: become the ghost in her machine, the professional phantom, or lose my money, my sanity, and my freedom forever. I realized I was no longer fighting for a marriage, but for a financial future and my very self. My anger transformed into a cold, diamond-hard focus. I found a hidden compartment in her antique jewelry box, sealed with a magnetic lock that I disabled with a borrowed tool. I pried it open and found it, a single, tiny, sleek, black, encrypted USB drive. It wasn't branded. On its side, etched in minute, almost invisible script, were 3 letters. AS. A gift from Sterling, perhaps? My breath hitched. This was the master key, the physical access point to Project Phoenix, and the total destruction of Evelyn's meticulously crafted life. The countdown had begun. The clinic was a fortress of polished granite and silent security. But I was no longer the broken man from the timeshare office. I was a student of shadow economies, having spent years learning how the shadiest operators hid their tracks, a skill now ruthlessly repurposed for justice. I used a fraction of my inheritance to fund a complete tactical overhaul. New identity papers, professional lock-picking tools, and high-end networking hardware. I needed to look less like a grieving husband and more like a high-level contractor. I even fabricated an ID badge with a generic vendor logo. In the dead of the third night, the 72-hour deadline rapidly approaching, I slipped past the last security checkpoint, moving through the cold, echoing halls of her esteemed medical practice. Every shadow felt like an accusation, every light a potential spotlight on my desperate act. The USB drive, a masterpiece of social engineering designed to mimic a legitimate contractor's maintenance key, worked perfectly. It granted me a furious 5-minute window of privileged network access. 5 minutes to save my future and reclaim my inheritance. Navigating the encrypted maze of the clinic's central server, I felt a rush of adrenaline I hadn't experienced since my days in my old, successful career. I located the digital safety deposit box, but it demanded a 12-character security phrase. Desperation threatened to drown me. Then I remembered the obsession in the patient log. On the back page, in tiny, almost invisible script, was a single, defiant word: Phoenix. The file name was the password, her narcissistic belief that she would rise, reborn and rich, from the ashes of our marriage. The folder Project Phoenix burst open, revealing not just a few documents, but an entire, sprawling archive. Hundreds of encrypted messages, explicit photos, detailed travel itineraries, and, most crucially, meticulously kept financial ledgers. It wasn't an affair. It was a long-term, calculated scheme that predated the anniversary dinner by at least a year. My eyes scanned a particularly damning chat log between Evelyn and Sterling. A cold, clinical discussion of how to use my impending inheritance to stabilize the collateral and mitigate tax risks. They viewed my sudden wealth not as a tragedy, but as a windfall to be harvested. I realized the truth was far worse than I had feared. They weren't just lovers. They were co-conspirators. As I frantically copied the massive data file onto my external drive, I caught my reflection in the dark monitor. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. I was no longer the heartbroken husband. I was a professional thief, a hacker, a man reborn by the sheer force of his wife's monstrous deceit. The progress bar reached 99%. Just then, a chime echoed through the silent server room. Not a security alarm, but a calendar alert from Evelyn's personal account, flashing on a nearby terminal. Sterile procedure. 7 a.m. In just under 3 hours, she would be back, conducting a highly sensitive medical procedure on her criminal lover, Alexander Sterling, possibly to hide evidence of her physical affair. I had the data, the gold, but I needed to get out now before the Phoenix herself returned. I escaped the clinic, slipping out just as the first cleaning crew arrived. The Project Phoenix data now safely mirrored across 3 secure off-site locations. The adrenaline subsided, replaced by a cold, hard rage as I reviewed the full dossier. The evidence revealed a conspiracy far grander than I had ever conceived. Evelyn and Sterling were not just lovers. They were running a sophisticated money laundering operation and tax fraud scheme. Sterling had been funneling patients and illicit cash from his private practice through Evelyn's struggling clinic for over a year, using her practice as a clean front to evade millions in taxes and hide assets from his own impending divorce. My inheritance, which I had poured into Evelyn's life, the European trips, the luxury apartment down payment, had inadvertently become a crucial part of the collateral for their illegal operations, a digital anchor point for their fraudulent loan structure. I had been their unwitting, financially convenient mark. I realized the terrifying scope of my situation. I didn't just have divorce evidence. I held a literal gold mine of criminal proof that implicated 2 powerful individuals in multiple federal felonies. The stakes had been raised from a simple marital dispute to a major criminal investigation. The truth of my life, the successful career I had sacrificed, the years of soul-crushing struggle. It was all secondary to Evelyn's relentless, cold-blooded ambition. She saw me, her husband, as nothing more than an ATM and a scapegoat for her instability narrative. I immediately contacted my best friend from my old life, now a corporate litigation expert, and handed him the hard drive. His instructions were simple: go silent, secure the data, and let her think she had won the first round. As predicted, Evelyn and her lawyers went ahead with their malicious motion, using my past mental breakdown as leverage to declare me legally incompetent and seize control of the millions in my account. They thought they were delivering the knockout blow, but their victory was a mirage built on arrogance. While studying the stack of legal documents they had served, searching for any weakness, I found it: a tiny, almost comical tactical error made by our junior counsel. The lawyer, trying to be thorough, had referenced an obscure, outdated clause from an old prenuptial draft that she had signed years ago and believed had been destroyed. This clause, meticulously researched by my counsel, stipulated that in the event of proven financial crime involving one party's business assets, the other party would be entitled to 100% of the liquidated marital assets, including the clinic, the business accounts, and any property purchased with my inheritance money. The key to the final, total victory, the complete annihilation of her career and her financial dreams, was sitting right under her nose, delivered to me by her own arrogance. I was no longer fighting for peace. I was fighting for reclamation. I had the evidence, the legal loophole, and the silent backing of my counsel. The time for whispering was over. The time for the avalanche was at hand. The courtroom on the day of the hearing was silent, heavy with the weight of my inheritance and my wife's ambitions. Evelyn, dressed in a pristine white suit that symbolized her false purity, sat across from me, smug and assured. She watched her lawyer present the case for my supposed instability, a methodical, cold-blooded dissection of my mental breakdown and my failed timeshare career. She looked down at me, a mixture of contempt and pity, certain that she was about to seize the millions and the right to gaslight me forever. She had won every skirmish, but she was about to lose the war. Then my turn came. My friend, my counsel, didn't argue my sanity. He didn't even mention the initial cheating attempt. Instead, he presented the cold, hard data from Project Phoenix directly to the presiding judge. The full, irrefutable dossier on the financial crimes of Dr. Evelyn Thorne and Alexander Sterling. He detailed the money laundering, the tax evasion, the fraudulent loan structure, and then, the final, devastating blow, he leveraged the obscure prenuptial clause that entitled me to everything. The evidence was voluminous, damning, and incontrovertible, displayed on the courtroom screens for all to see. The atmosphere in the courtroom dissolved into a collective intake of breath. Evelyn's face, usually a mask of professional control, crumbled into utter, ghastly terror, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. She hadn't just been caught cheating. She was facing a career-ending, life-shattering criminal indictment. Sterling, who had been observing from the gallery, quietly slipped out, his empire already beginning to fall. The judge, after a chillingly brief recess, ruled swiftly and definitively. Evelyn was not only denied any claim to my inheritance, but was ordered to forfeit her entire clinic, all its business assets, and all property purchased with the fraudulently acquired funds, to me, pending the outcome of the federal criminal investigation. Justice had landed like an avalanche, burying her completely. I got the clinic, the wealth, and the peace I craved, but the cost was 2 years of my life and the complete destruction of my innocence. Evelyn and Sterling were charged with multiple felonies. I had achieved my closure, not through forgiveness, but through absolute, surgical truth and the weaponization of her own greed. My old career was gone, but now I owned a high-end medical practice, a new foundation funded by the very inheritance she tried to steal. I finally felt a wave of profound calm wash over me. The poison of unresolved resentment was gone. The man who had died 2 years ago, the broken, failed husband, was finally resurrected as the CEO of her former empire. As the police escorted a shell-shocked, weeping Evelyn from the courtroom, her pristine white suit stained by the collapse of her entire world, she glanced at me one last time. There was no anger, only the cold, stark realization that her own arrogance had sealed her fate. I didn't flinch. I just smiled, a small, genuine smile. I finally had my life back.